and welcome to our British Water Thought Leadership series, Talking on Water. My name's Mark Fletcher and I'm the current chair of British Water. I have with me today David Black, Chief Executive of Ofwat, the economic regulator for water across England and Wales. And he's kindly agreed to do an interview which we're recording to share across the water sector. Good morning, David.
Good morning.
In terms of the outline for the interview, I'm going to ask a few questions and David can share his thoughts and we might have some follow-up for clarification. So I hope you're all suitably relaxed so we can make a start. So David, we've just had the PR24 draft determination released last week. So maybe to start with, you could outline what is this and why is it important?
Great, sure. Yes, so the 2024 price review, that's our 5-yearly process where we set the allowed revenues and service levels for water companies in England and Wales. What we've set out as the biggest ever investment package in the water sector, so a 300% increase in investment, and that will enable and drive action on contentious issues such as sewage discharges, but also on terms of securing the nation's future water supplies. And so there are 9 new reservoirs, for example, as to be funded as part of the package. So there's a huge set of work for the sector to address the issues that are both facing the sector now and perhaps very evident, and perhaps the ones that are less well known about but do require action for the future. So also action on things like net zero and improving customer service.
So we're all going to be pretty busy, and I'm sure you and your teams have been busy through the determination. So thanks for that. Maybe you could just expand a little bit in terms of what's your vision for Ofwat?
Sure. So in some ways, our vision does it relates to what the sector, should I say? So in terms of what we want to see for the sector, and so clearly the sector needs to change. And so we see ourselves as one of the enablers of that. And so it's our role as a regulator. We play a range of roles. So some of it is about looking ahead at the challenge the sector faces and making sure that the sector is on track to address with that. We clearly play a role in enabling investment to go forward. We try to set our regulatory frameworks to drive the changes that customers want and to make sure that the sector aligns to the customer interests. So the way that we regulate, for example, can help harness the interests of investors, company management, the supply chain, in the interests of customers and the environment. And ultimately, we're standing here as the protector of customers' interests. And so we are seeking to make sure that the sector does deliver for customers. And in some cases we need to challenge companies. In other cases we're working to enable change. And in other cases we're really helping the sector to step up and engage with third parties.
Super. Well, thanks very much. And I think it's very timely. It's very much front of mind. Are there any specific challenges from your perspective that you think really need to be addressed?
Yes, there's certainly a raft of those, and probably you might say the sector's facing its most challenging, I think, set of circumstances, at least for some decades. I mean, others may have been around longer, may have different views on this, but I think certainly the issue of sewage discharges has done a lot of harm to the sector's reputation, and clearly it's a key catalyst for public opinion, for stakeholders, for environmental groups, and so that requires urgent action, but also sustained action. So it is something that, it's a very difficult set of issues. So the sector does need to make progress on that. More broadly, I think there's questions about corporate behaviours. So things like dividend payments and executive pay. And I think the combination of the perception of companies not serving the public interest and then failing to deliver on things like sewage discharges has created this quite toxic atmosphere where there has been a loss of trust. But that also shouldn't blind us from the need to look ahead and address future challenges. So things like future water resources, which I've talked about. So unless the sector addresses, if you like, the potential future crises of tomorrow, it will merely go from one crisis to another. So what we're looking to do is basically address some of the pressing issues that are here and now, but also to take action to address some of these perhaps slower burning, but equally perhaps even more important, or at least as important, longer term issues.
Thanks very much. And we are at a time of more extreme extremes and the impacts of climate change coming upon us. What's your view from a British Water perspective? What's your view of the supply chain's role in solving some of these future challenges?
Sure, and good, and thanks for mentioning climate change because that does sit behind a lot of the challenges the sector faces. So both in terms of the impact on the sector's resilience and things like networks and resources, but also on how on the environment that the sector so crucially depends on to provide services, and so in a sense that climate change probably is the sector issue but it does sit alongside others. So the supply chain is clearly central to delivering what the sector needs to do. So any company, and they all have different arrangements, but is obviously very dependent on the supply chain to deliver on the huge capital delivery task that we see. So the stepping up of investment, so threefold across the sector, but more for some companies. And so clearly that's going to put a huge challenge on companies and their relationship with the supply chain. But equally, some of the BAU activities as well. So companies work in partnership with the supply chain to deliver on these. And I think and where they work well, they drive significant value for companies and customers. And where they work poorly, it's a significant detriment for companies and customers. And so getting the best out of these relationships will be ultimately what I think has significantly impacts on the sector's success going ahead. And then there's a partnership element with the supply chain, obviously, in terms of bringing in new resources, but equally with things like innovation, looking ahead, and the supply chain has the ability to bring lessons from other sectors as well, other parts of the world. And one of the things I'm really passionate about is for the sector actually to be more outward looking, to be drawing in more lessons from the outside world. And the supply chain, by its nature, because it's dealing with different customers, different clients, different situations, if we can get learnings from elsewhere on the globe, see how people are dealing with same issues elsewhere, in different issues elsewhere, what might lie ahead for the English and Welsh companies as well.
Yeah, so our supply chain task force we're trying to collate across the whole supply chain piece where we are in terms of resources. And I think I should commend Ofwat for your work with the Innovation Fund. I think that's been a really good way to try and draw in the supply chain, but also some of that national and international best practice. So thank you very much for that. I think that's progressing and developing very well.
Great, and we're planning to double the size of that at PR24. So there's going to be a lot more of that, we hope.
Oh, breaking news! That's fantastic. That's really good to hear. So, what do you think in terms of any opportunities to collaborate to safeguard our environment, and maybe think about delivering that social contract for the communities that we serve?
Yes. I'm just going to check, by collaboration, do you mean between Ofwat and the sector, or do you mean between different parts of the sector? Because clearly we as a regulator need to collaborate, and then both with other regulators, with the sector as well. And we've thought hard about how we can best do that. So I think the Innovation Fund is a great example of that. So although it's a fund, one of the purposes of it is to drive collaboration with between companies with the wider supply chain. We're planning to set up a water efficiency fund as well, and so that's a different set of challenges. But again, that is also about trying to drive a collaboration across the sector, particularly around the demand side on water. And so that's going to be really important as well. And then for Ofwat, we've set up Rapid as our partnership vehicle to work with other regulators on new water infrastructure. And I think there's a huge job to be done in terms of thinking ahead, looking at how the infrastructure planning processes work and Ofwat's role on that. So one of the things that I'm keen for Ofwat to do is to play a much more active role in the sector. So if in the past we were a bit more in the realms of setting frameworks and then going away and checking what's happened, I don't think with the challenges facing the sector, the pace of change we need, we have to move into a much more active role. And then I think there's some real questions as to how infrastructure planning is best affected in the sector if we look ahead. So, perhaps with storm overflows, we might say that, we've got a very comprehensive program now, but people are going to understandably say, well, why didn't you have that in place 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago? And I don't think there's any, this is not about blaming people or saying if this was done better, it would have been different. But I do think when we look ahead, we have to think about how investment planning works and whether the models that we've got are going to deliver this investment at the pace that we need and to have that level of agility that we're going to need, to react to changes and climate change driving change probably faster than we expect now. What we know is that we'll learn a lot more about how things work over the next 5 and 10 years as well.
So what's really positive about that is the future focus, and that collaboration is across the way in which you operate as a regulator, and seeing the collaboration that we want across the whole sector, but a bit more common purpose, and really valuing the role that regulation has in delivering value for our communities and for the environment. So I think that's really. And
we're also getting more interested in how companies work with the supply chain. Rightly, it's up to companies to set those commercial relationships, and we respect that. But equally, I think I would say Ofwat historically was relatively passive in this space. We think we need to understand, how this process is working, what it's delivering for the sector. How can we get best? Is there more to be learned from best practice, sharing best practice? How can we encourage the sector to be better at the procurement and the partnering with the supply chain? Because that is going to drive a lot of value. And if we're as a regulator not engaged on that, then we're not. Then I don't think we can play the role that we ought to be playing.
So that's my take on that is really responsible evolution of regulation and how we're using that to benefit everybody. And finally, we're covering a lot of things here. Anything else you'd like to share with our members, about this, maybe the direction that Ofwat's going and this very fresh and positive?
Yeah, so clearly what they'll see initially is obviously this huge level of investment that's been driven forward, and I think we'll be looking very closely at how the sector delivers against this. I don't think again waiting 5 years to make a judgment on that's going to work, so we're going to be more actively engaging in terms of on the delivery of that. But I do think looking ahead at sort of how the investment planning process works and how we can make it work better is going to be very key to the sector's success. And I think the sort of the split of responsibility between companies, the environmental regulators, and Ofwat, we're going to have to look at and see if how we can do things better. And I think from Ofwat's perspective, we want to be engaged, we want to be involved in this. And I think the work we've done with Rapid is a good sort of prototype in terms of how this might work.
Absolutely.
And it's not. We need to move away a bit from the set piece at the price review. Price reviews will be important. That does obviously commission vast amounts of work, but I don't think we can just rely on this process. The challenge for us is obviously we see things at the price review, and if we don't like where the sector's at, there's relatively limited ability to change things at this point in the process. So we need to have. And I see other regulators working in this space, working to the scene as well. If you look at the changes in the energy sector, but that's sort of a much more dynamic role. But that does raise questions about who's doing the investment planning, how it's been done, and how it's been delivered. And from Ofwat's perspective, we want to see the right outcomes from a customer perspective. It's not surprising that we're going to have to look at changes to this. I guess investment planning has always been changing in the sector. It's a hard thing to change because you're working on very long-term time horizons. But my sense is that given the scale of the challenges that we're facing, the other point is about the level of potential constraint from the ability of the supply chain to deliver on the scale of the challenges. So how can we get to a place where we can step up capital delivery? And then it's not just about delivering stuff either. We need to do this in the best way possible. So nature-based, catchment-based solutions. How do we get hybrid, the right hybrid solutions, the right green solutions? How do we innovate in terms of the sort of the way sewage networks operated, so that we're getting, it's not just about building concrete tanks on the end of pipes. That'll be part of it, but how do we make the sector work better? So I think there's what is exciting is there's huge scope in the sector. I think there is a lot of infrastructure in place, and that's great, but we need to make much better use of it and integrate it into the environment. and then win back public trust, and that's hugely challenging. But
it's hugely challenging, but I think it's really encouraging to hear all the messages that are coming through. I think having been in the sector for nearly 40 years, I think it's really positive to hear all of the things that you're saying. I think it's going to be good for customers. I think it's going to be good for nature, which is really important. And I think we have made huge strides in the sector, and it's important that we get that trust of the public as they connect more with nature anyway. So I think it's really encouraging, everything that you've shared with us. So many thanks. And we welcome your willingness to engage, share your thoughts, your concerns, but also your plans and that future focus. We want to wish you every success in your role, and on behalf of British Water, express our help and support going forward in any way we can help you address these challenges and turn them really into opportunities.
Thanks, Mark. No, really appreciate that. And no, we'll keep on engaging, because we're very keen as Ofwat to hear from outside perspectives as well. I think as a regulator, we benefit hugely. So thanks very much for the opportunity to have the discussion.
Thank you. Well, that concludes our session. It's a wrap. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Bye.